The names of places tell you a lot. Streets, towns, mountains, rivers. They say who was important in history. Names of famous local people or people with money. In Adirondack history, black settlers were clearly not these people. If they got anything named after them, it wasn't their name, just their race. Black people lived there. Some local residents today are trying to change that, one naming at a time. That's today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Claxton Hepburn Medical Center, dedicated to providing patient care and regional services to the people of St. Lawrence County. claxtonhepburn.org.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Thursday, July 18th. First up, New York State is closing 2 more prisons in the next 90 days, including one in the North Country. Great Meadow, a maximum security prison in Washington County, was ordered to close, as was Sullivan Correctional Facility in Sullivan County. At the start of this year, Great Meadow incarcerated about 490 people and employed about 700. The State Department of Corrections and Community Supervision announced the closure in a letter released today. The director, Daniel Martuscello, called the decision a difficult one for all involved. Earlier this year, Martuscello testified in Albany about staffing shortages, which he estimated to be around 3,800 job vacancies in prisons around the state. The state's inmate population in New York has also been steadily declining, down by 55% since the late 1990s. The area's state assemblyman Matt Simpson called the closure an unwise decision. This year's state budget allows Governor Kathy Hochul to shutter a total of 5 correctional facilities. Over the last 15 years, the state has closed 25 of them. About a third of those prison closures have been in the North Country. Glens Falls is cleaning up following Tuesday's powerful storm. Warren County declared a state of emergency yesterday. At the Garvey Volkswagen dealer in Queensbury, a power line came down, setting multiple vehicles on fire and damaging others. No one was hurt. J.P. Garvey, the auto group's general manager, told Kara Chapman firefighters had to dig up the asphalt and pour thousands of gallons of water on it to stop the damage.
What happened at multiple levels is that the ground got so hot that it actually started melting the cars near it.
Oh my!
So in addition to it was really crazy. So in addition to the cars that actually caught fire, and some of those got so hot that in one case, the one that really burned had another car maybe 20 or 30 feet away from it, and it melted the side of that car, all the plastic trim that was on it. And for the cars that were closer to the line, the heat from the wire on the ground actually melted their tires, melted some of their trim panels and did other damage to the vehicle that way. So the amount of heat involved here was pretty incredible.
Do you have a total for how many were affected by the fires?
So we're still trying to figure that out 100%. Some vehicles looked okay when we assessed them, but we started one up, and for instance, it had quite a bit of water in it from the fire department, from them doing their job. No blame there, of course, but we've got to figure out if that caused any damage to the vehicle. Our preliminary count is that at least 3 of the cars, and they were all our cars, by the way. It's important to note that no customer vehicles were damaged, thankfully, by this. But we think at least 3 are total losses, and we have another 4 or 5 that have some degree of damage one way or another.
That was J.P. Garvey from Garvey Volkswagen speaking with Champlain Valley reporter Kara Chapman. A hill just north of the Tri-Lakes region uses a racial epithet in its name. A group of people are trying to change that name to honor one of the Adirondacks' original black settlers. Our new Report for America reporter David Escobar has this story.
So thanks for coming out on this historic evening in spite of the tornadoes and everything. I'm glad you all made it.
Dozens of locals crowd into Hex and Hop Brewery in Bloomingdale. They're not here for trivia night or a concert. They're here for a history lesson.
I am so proud that we are honoring our fellow Adirondacker this way. By name, not just by skin color.
That's Kurt Staker. He's a professor of natural science at Paul Smith College. He's been researching the history of early black settlers in the Adirondacks. He says just 3 miles away from the bar is a remote hill that was once home to thriving communities of black settlers in the 1800s. But if you look on a map, the hill's current name is Negro Hill, or N-word Hill as Steger calls it. So Steger and a group of academics are trying to change that.
There are a lot of different options for naming the hill, and we know it was named after the African American community. But it's nice to put a real name on there to help humanize it. So we were able to definitively link one family to that hill.
Steger's team is proposing the name Murray Hill after Wesley Murray and his family. Records show the Murrays most likely moved to Vermontville in the 1850s. Steger says at one point in time, significant amounts of the land in St. Armand, North Elba, and Franklin were black-owned. And many of these families came up to the North Country for a similar reason.
Most of them were free people of color, well established in urban areas in central and eastern New York, especially, and around New York City. So it was a story of people coming up, taking the challenge of becoming farmers.
Steger didn't just stumble across the story of the Murrays. Back in 2023, his team worked to change a nearby brook that had the same derogatory name. They named it after black settler John Thomas, who was neighbors with the Murrays. It started with a petition signed by dozens of community members that was later sent to the U.S. Board on Geographic Names for approval. Steger says grassroots support is crucial to an approval on renaming applications. So his team is hoping today's presentation will inspire attendees to sign a new petition for Murray Hill.
The black community was here, there were settlers, there were people, they built up this community, in the 1800s, and it's disrespectful to call them by, an epithet.
That's Ellen Bieberman. She lives in Vermontville, close to the site of N-word Hill. And not everyone who signed the petition lives in the North Country. Nadine Block is visiting from Washington, D.C. to see friends. She says renaming landmarks like N-word Hill is part of a bigger trend she's observed across the country.
As a country, we have never really grappled with our racist, colonial history, and that in order to move forward, we really need to learn the history and appreciate the diversity that has made us what we are today.
The effort to rename N-word Hill isn't a new idea. Over the past decade, activists across the country have worked to change the names of streets, statues, and schools that are derogatory or honor a racist figure. Some of those names have been met with protest. Steger says the situation with N-word Hill is a little different. For one, it's named after a racial epithet, not in the memory of a person. And he says community members have largely been on board with the name change.
I think part of it is because it's not being framed as something that comes from the outside. It's not politicized. It's not just doing it because it's a cultural fad or something. It's framed as, this is the story of fellow Adirondackers, just like us, living right where we live. Why would we not want to honor them? And why in the world would we want to insult them?
Steger says renaming the hill is about more than just getting rid of a racist name. It's about memorializing a forgotten piece of Vermontville.
So the way I see the addition of this to our narrative of who we are as Adirondackers, it's kind of like recognizing the full tapestry of humanity, the human stories here, instead of a single thread.
Steger and his team are continuing to gather support from local organizations and hoping to keep collecting signatures from community members. Their goal is to present broad support for the name Murray Hill before they send the petition to the U.S. Board on Geographic Names. David Escobar, North Country Public Radio in Bloomingdale.
We have more news all the time on our website, ncpr.org. Music today by Eddie Lawrence of Moira and Patricia Julian of Burlington. I'm David Sommerstein, North Country Public Radio.